Breaking news. Can you tell me about the Ukrainian situation during the Wagner mutiny in Russia? In Ukraine, fighting continued for another day as the short-lived coup led by Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin played out in Russia. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine is now 385 days old, and its leader, the Wagner mercenary group, made his move on day 382. After seizing military sites in the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don, Yevgeny Prigozhin took to social media to challenge the military leadership. He then began a «march of justice» toward Moscow. The coup didn't last long. With Prigozhin's help, the coup that began 200 kilometers south of Moscow ended after only 24 hours. After offering sanctuary to Prigozhin and the Wagner mercenaries, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko took credit for defusing the situation. "There is a fence, everything is available, erect your tents," he said, adding that an abandoned military base had been designated for their use. How much ground has been lost or gained during the grinding counteroffensive? Australian National University Associate Professor Matthew Sussex is an expert on Russian strategic studies and foreign policy. He claimed that after 16 months of fighting, Russia and its proxies now control 15% of Ukrainian territory, up from 5% in eastern Ukraine in 2014. About 200 square kilometers have been freed by the Ukrainians since the counteroffensive began, about 4 weeks ago. Since this is dispersed along a front that stretches for over 1,000 kilometers, Mr. Sussex argues that it is not an excessive amount. Also, most of the territory where the Ukrainians are counterattacking consists of just flat farmland that is very much out in the open, with a few wooded areas thrown in for good measure. This obviously will not happen instantly. Because of this, the counteroffensive will be more of a slow and steady effort than a swift one. Even more so when Russian air power remains superior, if not dominant. It's something that will slow the Ukrainians down significantly and cause a lot more casualties. Russian ground forces continued fighting despite the country's internal power struggle and failed coup attempt. Associate Professor of National and Security Studies at Curtin University Alexei Muraviev said that Ukraine has not yet made progress by penetrating Russian defenses, such as the so-called Surovikin line. Russians continue to pound Ukraine with missile strikes, aerial strikes, and drone strikes, and continue to fight along the front line, despite Putin's efforts to negotiate a political solution with Prigozhin and his men, he said. Mr. Muraviev has stated that Russia's aerial superiority in attacks and what he calls a failure by Ukrainian and Western intelligence to correctly identify Russia's defensive layout are factors preventing a Ukrainian breakthrough. The territorial boundaries have not changed significantly over the past 8 months. Despite significant losses on both sides, neither Ukraine nor Russia have advanced their territory by more than 260 square kilometers in the past week. Russia initially gained over 2,600 square kilometers per week during the invasion's early stages, so this rate is comparable. A major victory for Ukraine was preventing Russia from quickly seizing its capital city by holding it on the 25th of March 2022. By November 2022, the Ukrainian military had successfully counterattacked in Kharkiv and Kherson, retaking previously lost territory. Could the Ukrainians benefit from the fallout in Russia following the coup? A breakthrough on the battlefield seems unlikely after nearly 4 weeks of Ukraine's counteroffensive. For tactical reasons, both sides are keeping their current and future strategic information close to the vest, according to Dr. Jessica Genower, a senior lecturer in international relations at Flinders University who has been analyzing the conflict in Ukraine in the War in Ukraine. Update from Kyiv podcast. At this point, nobody can say for sure. But I believe that Ukraine will make some major progress before November, she said. Ukrainian forces and capabilities have not been fully committed at this time, in my opinion, to the relatively minor operations that have been going on over the past few weeks. And I have no doubt that Ukraine is waiting for the most opportune moment and the most opportune place to try to engage in more serious counteroffensive operations. The full effects of Prigozhin's challenge have yet to be felt, according to Mark Edel, a professor of Soviet history at the University of Melbourne. As a result of this, Russia has lost one of its most capable military units. That's one of the consequences, he concluded. Perhaps the command is more cohesive now that Prigozhin isn't deferring to the military establishment. So far, it doesn't appear to have had much of an effect on the political system. It was speculated by some analysts that the Russian state was disintegrating into a civil war. At the moment, I don't see it that way. This is a mutiny, but it's not a revolution just yet. But a lot rides on what Putin does next to center power in Russia around himself.